Okay, Matt, I have everything going and whenever you're ready.
All right, sounds good, Jerry. Appreciate it. So, we're here today for the October 2024 climate discussion, hosted by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University. We've had quite the past month, folks. We started out September with a continuation of the dry conditions from the previous August, and things were getting pretty detrimental across the state, seeing plenty of impacts on the agricultural side and starting to see some hydrological impacts from the dry conditions. But then lo and behold, I'm talking to farmers constantly, and it was like, man, we could really use a nice hurricane to come out of the Gulf of Mexico. And we got not only one, but two hurricanes. So, and the second one was really the hurricane that really helped us out. So, um, starting off with our homework before we get started, webinar series presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at WKU, partnership with NIDIS in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. Production delivery of this webinar reflects the contributions of a variety of partners, including Jerry and his folks at the Kentucky Climate Center and Kentucky Mesonet. Tiffany, their manager down there, really helped me out with some photos looking back from last year to this year. And then Chip Zimmer and his folks over at the Division of Water. Our next scheduled webinar is November 7th, so it is going to be a little over a month before we talk to you guys again. But this webinar is also currently being recorded and available on the YouTube channel, the Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel. So again, want to start off, Dr. Josh Jackson. He's here in my department at UK. He's an assistant professor for livestock systems, and he also has his own farm over in Mercer County. And Mercer County, Boyle County kind of area were one of the worst hit areas in terms of the drought conditions in early September and August, so on and so forth. And he sent me this picture, I believe it was September 16th, of his cattle grazing in this pasture. And it was amazing just how burnt and crispy his pastures looked over there in Mercer County. They were really needing some moisture. And of course, they got that this past week. So again, outline, same as always, going over the recent conditions here in the Bluegrass State, impacts mainly on the ag side, looking at the outlooks moving forward, and a quick question and summary discussion. Now, again, Tiffany Clark down there with the Kentucky Mesonet, their manager, she sent me a variety of these kind of photos this month, looking back at where we were in September of 2023 compared to where we're at in September of 2024. So these were taken close to the peak of the drought impacts here in the state of Kentucky. And this in particular is Marshall County. So September 16, 2023, very green, lush pasture areas out there. And then we look at September 16, 2024, and it's almost the opposite end of the spectrum. So this is what we're dealing with across most of the state, maybe absent some portions of the Cumberland Valley region down there in southeastern Kentucky. But I'm going to show you additional images like these whenever we're talking about ag impacts. So starting off, looking at 7-day radar estimates. It's kind of weird to talk about this because most of September we were just talking about drought, drought, drought. We were having meetings on it every week. And then lo and behold, Hurricane Helene comes up through the Gulf of Mexico, hits the Florida Panhandle, and quickly approaches Kentucky last Thursday night and dumps an exceptional amount of rainfall on the state of Kentucky. So this goes back, I believe it is into last Thursday. What I want to add to this, and I guess we'll see this in the next slide, we had a pretty active pattern in place even before Hurricane Helene hit the Bluegrass State last week. So, but this just goes back to last Thursday. Most of the state is in that 3 to 5 inch range. Again, looking down there in Southeastern Kentucky, there's some folks in the 1-2 inch range, but they were actually looking all right. They had seen some showers and storms earlier on in the month and in August that kind of kept them out of the drought conditions. So it wasn't um, it wasn't a must that they got to 3, 4, 5 inches down that way, but otherwise the highest totals were seen across central and western Kentucky. Some folks out that way saw 4 or 5 plus inches. You see 6.15 out there in the purchase region. So this system went through and produced a ton of rainfall. But the nice part about this is it was a slow soaking rainfall, so light to moderate intensity. It didn't all come, in the matter of 6 hours. So it was able to infiltrate that soil profile and even at deeper levels. So we didn't see as much runoff with this system. In turn, we didn't see a lot of flash flood warnings out that way. So that was a good part about this event. Going back the past 30 days, we start seeing those higher totals show up. The state average was 5.77 inches, which is over 2 inches above normal. September is normally one of the driest months of the year here in the Bluegrass State, along with October and November. But places like Fayette County on there, the Mesnet on the south side of the county recorded 6 inches. You see quite a few folks over western and central Kentucky, 7 inches plus. There were some deficits. I shouldn't say deficits. It was still slightly above normal down there in southeastern Kentucky. But again, they have been hitting on rain showers during this whole drought period we've had recently. Moving out 60 days, 7.42 inch average across the state, which is slightly above normal. A lot of 6, 7, 8 inch totals across the Bluegrass State. And moving out 90 days, 13.06 inch average. I should say this data down here in the lower left-hand corner, we have a database with the Ag Weather Center that incorporates measurement stations and ASOS stations across the state. So that's where that average is coming from. But 13 inches across the state over the past 90 days on average, which is about 1.5 inches above normal. Now, the highest totals are down there in southeastern Kentucky. So again, they had some rainfall in place, some soil moisture in place that kept them from going into some of these higher intense categories of drought conditions. Looking at deviation from normal, 30-day in the upper left-hand corner, 60-day in the upper right-hand, and 90-day in the lower right-hand corner. And you're seeing a lot of green on those maps, no matter which one you look at. Maybe it's some yellow here and there, but green, that means above normal rainfall, especially those blues. Looking at 30-day rainfall after this hurricane tropical system moved through the area, you are seeing some shades of blue on this map, which would indicate 5 inches above normal, which is almost crazy to think that we didn't have any flooding, but that's been the case. A lot of green, 1 to 3 inches above normal. Going back 60 days, you are starting to see some more of those yellow shades show up. So below normal rainfall, especially up there in northern Kentucky, south central Kentucky, over by Monticello, so on and so forth. And then 90-day, again, more of those green shades showing up, going back to early July when we had some pretty decent rainfall events over the first half of that month. But overall, I got on the Midwestern Regional Climate Center. Kentucky averaged 6.68 inches of rainfall for the month, which is about 3.5 inches above normal. Now, I will tell you guys, normally I get on here, I'm like, man, this was, the 10th wettest September on record, so on and so forth. The problem is NCEI, their main building is located there in Asheville. And Jerry might have some more information on this. Maybe we can talk about in the discussion session, or you can chime in now. But I don't know if they were directly impacted, flooded. I don't think they were, but communications have gone down, so I wasn't able to access those rankings. But 6.68 inches for the month of September. But if we go by data through September 22nd, ahead of the active week we saw last week, the state had only averaged 1.23 inches by September 22nd. So again, over that period, the state has averaged about 5 inches the past 14 days. Um, so if we didn't have this event, we would be in a world of hurt, and especially on the agricultural side. And we'll get to some of those ag impacts here in a second. Looks like Chip said their office is downtown, which is on a hill, but no power or internet. So yeah, thank you, Chip. Thank you. In the last 14 days, state has averaged about 5 inches this fall, the 21st driest August ever recorded. So we need the rainfall and we got it. Again, more infiltration rather than runoff with this particular event. Looking at temperatures, it was a warmer month here in the Bluegrass State. We did have some cooler periods here and there, but overall, it was warmer than normal. The average state temperature was 70.8 degrees, which was about 2.5 degrees above normal, maybe closer to normal. Look at the map down there in the southeastern sections of the state, but otherwise warmer for most everyone else. I looked at some preliminary data from the MRCC. Again, I don't have those rankings data in front of me, but by their data, and again, Jerry and Chip can correct me if I'm wrong, but it hinted at that every month in 2024 has ran above normal in terms of temperatures. So that's pretty significant. And if we continue this direction, through the end of 2024, I can only assume we're going to add another year to that top 10 list of warmest years on record in Kentucky. But we did have some occasional bouts of very warm temperatures here in Kentucky, especially September 20th and 21st. We had highs getting to the upper 80s to middle 90s. That's over 10 degrees above normal. We want that crispy fall air, kind of what we've felt recently here in Kentucky. I know I woke up this morning, it was in the 50s. I love it. I love this time of year. But during that time period, September 20th and 21st, we had some heat indices still hitting the century mark, especially over in Western Kentucky. So livestock heat stress was still a thing, even as we got into the latter stages of September. Now, I also wanted to include one of the biggest beneficiaries of all this rain we got this past week were livestock producers and their pastures. It's going to allow them to green up a little bit, grow a little bit ahead of any hard freezes. So I want to give you guys an idea. We are getting to that time of year where the National Weather Service will potentially start issuing some frost advisories, freeze warnings, because agriculture is still susceptible at this time. But on average, our first freeze we see in Kentucky is around the third, fourth week of October. Now, if I change this map and we're looking at the first 28-degree freeze, in other words, the first hard freeze of the year, that's going to be the end of October, start of November. Now, in terms of kind of diminishing pasture growth as we go into the winter months, just talking to folks across the state, usually takes 3 pretty hard freezes back to back to back to really halt that development, but and go into dormancy. And looking at the outlooks, I don't want to go too much into it right now, but yeah, it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. Now, lastly, I should have mentioned this when I started this slide. I know me and Jerry and Chip have been at presentations, and maybe this has just been a pet peeve of mine, but I feel like I just put a little bit of a fun aspect on this slide. Whenever we go to conferences, we're in like the region for the Midwestern Regional Climate Center, but we're also in the region for the Southeast Climate Hub, so on and so forth. So Kentucky's, it might be in the Midwest, it might be in the Southeast. So I got on Chat GPT today, and these are some of the regions it suggested we should start calling ourselves with Tennessee: Southern Highlands, Ridge View region, Cumberland Confluence. I kind of like that one. Heritage Valley, Riverbend region, Smoky Foothills. So if anyone wants to take this and run with it, feel free. So anyways, going back to these drought conditions and this hurricane really helping us out. This upper left-hand image is showing the calculated soil moisture anomaly. We're seeing some green shades show up across Kentucky now, which for me, Chip, Jerry, it's been a while since we've seen some of those green shades. But Hurricane Helene really put a dent in all those deficits we had been seeing up through the fourth week of September. Looking at the latest Kentucky crop progress and condition report, this was a look at Kentucky topsoil moisture as seen by agents and whatnot across the state. The previous week, so not this Monday, but the previous Monday, over 70%, closing in on 80% of Kentucky topsoil moisture was classified as short to very short. Hurricane Helene went through, and we saw that percentage drop all the way down to a shade over 20%. So almost a 60% difference from one week to the other. So that just goes to show you how much one event can make a difference. Looking at stream flows across the state, looking very solid, looking very good at this point. A lot of stream flows. This was 7-day average stream flow today, but much above normal across the state in those dark blue, light blue shades. And then lastly, want to show an example of the impact of Hurricane Helene on soil moisture. Now, this is at varying levels here in the lower right-hand corner from the Fulton County Mesnet station out there. I think we got Ben Rudy on today, the A&R agent out that way. But you can see this goes all the way back into July and had some pretty decent rainfall events early on in the month. And then especially topsoil moisture in those gray and blue lines there, 2-inch and 4-inch, really started to drop off. Had another rainfall event, it looks like late July, but it wasn't enough, and it just kept on continually dropping throughout August into September, into that third, fourth week of September. And then they started getting some decent rainfall again, not only from Hurricane Helene, but some of those other events that hit that week. So this is the kind of soil moisture profile we're seeing across most of the Kentucky mesonet stations throughout the Bluegrass State right now. So this is what we love to see, especially this being our driest time of the year. Looking at the outlooks, they're not ideal. So having these 3, 4, 5 inches to replenish this soil profile, we're very lucky to see it. So going back to the September 24th update of the U.S. Drought Monitor, this was released on Thursday, September 26th, just ahead of Hurricane Helene moving through. And this is the worst the map had looked for Kentucky all growing season. You had to go back to January of earlier this year when we were coming out of our latest drought, or of our last drought, for a higher drought percentage across the state. But at this point, a good portion of Western Kentucky, Central Kentucky, up in the Bluegrass, were in that moderate to severe drought category, even some in that extreme drought category. Now, you take a look at that map right there, September 24th, so last Thursday when it was released on the 26th, to what it looks like now. A lot of those browns and orange shades are gone. Most of the state is free of drought conditions. Even looking at Ohio, let me go back again, take a look at the Ohio region there. Most folks in extreme, exceptional drought, especially southeastern Ohio. And this area it feeds the Ohio River in a pretty good way. And move it forward to the update this morning, and you really saw that area diminish. So they're not out of the woods yet, but again, this active week of weather this previous week really helps out. Now, zooming into the state of Kentucky, again, this is what we looked like last Thursday with that update. Had some extreme drought across portions of the bluegrass region over there in northeastern Kentucky. But then we go to this week and we see all those shades essentially disappear. Um, Chip can correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, improving by two categories on the U.S. drought monitor uh, and on a 1 week time span doesn't happen very often. It usually happens with these hurricanes. So, um, yeah. So we look at some of these percentages up here. You look at that second row that says last week, 93.84% of the state was anywhere from abnormally dry to being in drought last week. That dropped to 40% this week. 60, almost 67% of the state was in the moderate to severe to extreme drought categories last week. And we're down to 1% this week. And so quite the diminishment in drought conditions across the area, which is what we love to see. Chip just got on here. 2 levels is rare. Not sure I've ever seen 3 levels before this week. I didn't realize we dropped three levels, but yeah, extreme severe. Okay, yeah. But Kevin says any data on crop yields in Kentucky. Um, so USDA NASC came out with their estimates recently. I believe corn was pretty similar to 2023, if I remember right, and beans were slightly below. I'd have to get those exact numbers, but I honestly, Kevin, I expected the beans to be a lot lower, but um, yeah. So, but I'm not the specialist on that route, but moving forward, this is a look at those category improvements. Now I see that 3 class improvement that Chip was talking about exactly there in the bluegrass region, going from extreme drought all the way down to abnormally dry. But that was pretty widespread across the region, not only Kentucky, over in eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, especially where they saw all the flooding situation, northern Georgia, you name it. So look at severe weather. It was all mainly associated with Hurricane Helene moving through the region. High winds. Not only did we get the significant rainfall, but the bluegrass region, eastern Kentucky, did see some 50, 60 mile per hour winds at times. And that wasn't ideal. That led to images like you see in the lower left hand picture of some power lines down in Georgetown, Kentucky. Looking at all the power outages across the state in the lower right hand picture. This at this point, this was taken by the National Weather Service down there in, I believe, South Carolina. But at this point, there was over 1 million without power in South Carolina. North Carolina over 700,000. Same thing in Georgia. Here in Kentucky, we were at 132, almost 133,000. But I thought I read someplace we were closer to 150 at the peak event. If Chip, if anybody has better data on that, feel free to share. But there was a lot of folks without power for 2, 3 days around Fayette County here. Not ideal, but that's also going to impact, these very um, the crops that were impacted by a drought this year that were, in other words, kind of brittle and wouldn't take much to lay some of these crops down. So I haven't heard much in the way across the state how much impact there was in terms of crops, but I'm sure I'll be getting some information sent into me pretty soon. But this was quite the system. Usually we see hurricanes pass through the state. Don't necessarily see this kind of wind a lot. We don't see this kind of rain a lot. Sure, it can bring some drought busting rains to the region, but having 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of soaking rainfall is something else. So Let's see. Ben put on here lots of variation yield with corn and soybeans. The later the plant date, the lower the yield. We had some full season bean going in at the same time as wheat bean were being planted. These last two rains will help the last season beans, but their yields will be decreased. So yeah. The later planted beans, um, it seems were heard across the state. But as Ben was saying, this hurricane was a blessing. So, all right. So I know this isn't Kentucky, but I want to mention it a little bit because it really caught my eye and it blows my mind in a way a little bit. But of course, it's been all over the news recently what's happened near the Asheville area, North Carolina interstates, completely shut down in some locations. I thought I read someplace that one of the interstates like wouldn't be open again until well into 2025. But this number up here from, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I'm going to say Busick, North Carolina, and Yancey County. They recorded almost 31 inches of rain between 8 a.m. on September 24th and 8 a.m. on September 28th. 31 inches of rain. Folks, we average about 50 inches per year here in the Bluegrass State. They saw 31 inches in 4 days' time. So it's absolutely mind-boggling to think about that. Just to put it into perspective, maybe compared to the 2022 um, flooding in Eastern Kentucky. I know we can't do apples to apples here, but the highest rainfall total from Eastern Kentucky during that event was 14 inches in Southern Knott County. So 14 inches in Southern Knott County. These folks saw 30, almost 31 inches. So an unbelievable amount of rain, and you all have seen the devastation down that way. There was some worry about the potential for another hurricane to sneak up through that area later this week, but every model run I look at seems like that potential is kind of dying out. And this image down here in at the bottom of the slide is from the National Hurricane Center and shows the current activity out there right now. So they got Hurricane Kirk and Leslie down there, tropical storm. But if I remember, look at the models right, those are going to curve back out into the Atlantic. So, yeah. So looking at ag impacts, looking at the crop progress and condition report this week, corn harvest is at 56%. Last week was at 45. That's slightly ahead of the 5-year average of 51% at this time of year. Soybeans harvested at 28% this week. Let's see, about what is that? 9% ahead of the 5-year average. But that goes, we go back into early September and farmers were able to make really good headway with dry conditions in place. Now with 5-6 inches of rainfall on the ground this past week, sure, it's going to slow down. But I don't know of many farmers that are complaining about that too much. So we'll slow down harvest a little bit, but we won't have any fire issues like we may have had to deal with prior to this rainfall event. So that's another positive. The main impact this past month was on pastures out there and for livestock producers. Um, their fields turning very brown. These are just some additional pictures from Dr. Jackson over there in Mercer County showing what he was dealing with. There was a lot of producers across the state already feeding hay. There was some talk among producers about farm ponds, those water resources starting to run low. And you can kind of see that over in the right-hand picture there, the upper left-hand corner. But some of these ponds and whatnot not diminishing. What I found interesting, and I don't have a good answer for this, but he showed me this picture over on the right hand corner, and that field right there in the middle, in the middle of that field is pretty dark green. There's been no cattle on that field whatsoever. But you look on the outer edges of that field in the middle, and it's turning awfully brown and whatnot. And we were hypothesizing that maybe those trees were pulling some of that moisture. I'm not sure if that's the case, but we found it very interesting. But taking into account all these ag impacts between the impact on pastures already starting to feed hay, the row crop folks across the state were having problems with dry down this year, just drying down extremely fast. We're within these, um, well, dry but hot conditions out there. But this all led us to declare a level 1 drought declaration for all Kentucky counties. This came from the Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet. Chip might be able to add on a little bit more about this. We had a meeting on this aspect a couple days ago, and it sounds like this might be going away, but I'll let Chip comment on that. But again, this was mainly the agricultural side of drought this year, not so much the hydrologic side of drought. So moving forward, again, these are from Tiffany over at the Kentucky Mesna, just looking at last year compared to this year. September 16th in Ballard County, again, you get that green lush color across all the fields, and you go to Ballard County in 2024. Harvest is progressing quickly, but you do see the darker tan colors in that picture. Of course, we went from beans to corn there too, but neither there here nor there. But Nicholas County, September 16, 2023. I think these two images really show the difference. And then again, there in 2024, just how much more brown we're seeing across the area and the impact on pastures in Nicholas County. Now, moving forward, 7-day rainfall totals, essentially nothing here in the state of Kentucky, below 1/10 of an inch across the Appalachian area there in eastern Kentucky, but otherwise everyone looks to stay dry. Those darker orange red shades down there in the Gulf of Mexico is associated with that potential disturbance down that way. Again, there was some worry it'd turn into a hurricane, move up the East Coast again, but that looks to no longer be an issue. Looking farther out, the 6 to 10 day outlook, temperature and precipitation. We have some dark shades of red across the western half of the United States, hinting at high confidence and above normal temperatures winning out over that October 8th to 12th time frame. Some darker blue shades across the East Coast at this time, hinting at below normal temperatures for that time frame. And we're kind of stuck there in the middle, near normal to below normal temperatures. But we are seeing some dark brown shades when we're looking at precipitation. So as wet as we were this previous week, we're going to be dry this upcoming week, and that looks to continue into that October 8th to 12th timeframe. That looks to continue into the middle portions of October as we look to the 8 to 14 day time frame, so 2 weeks out. And again, look at temperature near normal, favored near normal here in Kentucky. Looking at the month as a whole, we just looked at the first half of October, essentially going out 8 to 14 days. If we take into account the latter 2 weeks, this is what the outlooks are looking like. Equal chances for above, near, or below normal temperatures in Kentucky, so it could essentially go either way. And then monthly precipitation really leaning toward below normal for the month as a whole. And then the next 3 months, October, November, December, leaning toward above normal temperatures, while there's equal chances for below, near, or above normal precipitation. So whenever you see equal chances on these maps, the confidence isn't really there in the forecast, or it's not enough for forecasters to really lean toward any direction. So moving into the winter months, a La Nina is favored this year, which a La Nina would normally mean wetter than normal conditions during the wintertime in Kentucky. But This is a rather weak La Nina, which the weaker the La Nina, the weaker the El Nino. Um, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see the impacts that are normally associated with a strong El Nino or a strong La Nina. So El Nino is typically drier here during the winter months. A strong La Nina is typically wetter, but the weaker this particular oscillation gets, the less likely it could go really any way this winter. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. Monthly stream flow outlook, we're looking a lot better from where Chip said we were last month. Of course, we couldn't predict that hurricane early in September, but luckily we got that hurricane, so our forecast stream flows are looking awfully good for the month of October. Drought conditions are looking a lot better. I see a lot of green tan on that map, whether drought removal is likely or drought remains but improves. This was actually released on September 30th. So they had some hints we were going to see all that drought removed from the U.S. Drought Monitor here recently. But yeah, so some of those areas might see drought remain, but improving in nature. So significant wildland fire potential. You get 4, 5, 6 inches of rainfall. You're not going to have issues anytime soon. So, in summary, it was all about Hurricane Helene this past week, brought the area a drought busting rainfall for the region. As Chip mentioned, having a 3-category improvement on the U.S. Drought Monitor is very rare to see. Many saw 2-category improvements really replenish that soil profile across the state. Pastures will benefit. It was too late for a lot of grain crops across the state. Long range outlooks moving forward, heading at a drier October overall. We'll see how that pans out. Again, it's hard for us to forecast these hurricanes, 3 or 4 weeks out. So who knows? Maybe we have another hurricane work up into Kentucky. Hurricane season is a long ways from being over. So September, October, typically your peak months, and then it kind of diminishes from there. And then long range outlooks, again, temperatures could go either way moving forward through the end of November or October. That first frost, usually the end of October. Hard freeze going into early November. So with that, if you ever have any questions, you got any feedback, please reach out to one of us on this slide. And I know we're out of drought conditions for the most part, but Chip would really appreciate you all putting in your drought or hydrologic impact reporter. So it's not all about drought. If it's wet, it's nice to know that too. So appreciate you all joining with us today. And with that, I'm going to leave it up for questions and discussion. So. Okay, Chip said the press release ending it was released today. So, all right, awesome. Thank you. So he's talking about that level 1 drought declaration. It is no longer a thing here in Kentucky. So I guess, Chip, anytime we start going into drought conditions, we should probably just convene the group and maybe there'll be a big widespread rainfall event to occur. So let's see. We see that all the time in row crop fields. You have several factors that edge effect from trees. Okay, here we go. Shade, tree roots, removing water and nutrients. That is why your heavy row crop counties producers that do not have moving fence rows, they don't remove fence rows and clumps of trees in those fields. All right. Okay. Good to know. Good to know, Ben. Thank you. Kevin, any information on Mississippi River levels? So I was looking at this right before we got on this call, and Hurricane Helene really helped out those levels. At one point in early September, we went into those low water thresholds again, and based on the graphs I just looked at, we're going to be all right for a while. So hopefully we get some additional rains moving forward. I know outlooks aren't the most promising moving forward, but just personally speaking, I think we're in a much better spot than where we've been the past 2 years. So I'm sure Ben's gonna have more information on that than I do. So if he wants to comment, feel free. So but that was just based on the graphs I saw out that way. So Shane says all-time low pressure readings for September from Helene were set in Louisville, Lexington, and Paducah. Okay, awesome. So Shane, those broke the levels from the March 3rd event last year. That's something else, man. Huh.
Well, I think these are just
Oh,
September
September.
records.
September.
Yeah.
Sorry. My mind was
We
going a
didn't break
different
those.
place.
No, I thought the same thing, and I was like, no, this is September.
Yeah. Thank you, Shane. I misread that. Or at least I was thinking differently in my mind. Anybody else? Any other comments? Ben said river is up now, but will continue to go down according to the models. We were getting closer to having issues similar to the last couple of years. So, all right. Hurricane Helene. Oh man. I'm kind of comparing this hurricane to, I believe it was 12 when Hurricane Isaac moved through and really helped out the bean crop this year, but this was more so for pastures across the state. So, yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll have NCEI back up for next month's meeting.
Yeah.
Although we'll see.
It was a little different getting all the information together this month, but I made it. I made it. So,
Yeah, good job. I was trying to get some stuff earlier and then nope, no dice.
yeah. Let's see. Shane also commented seventh wettest September all time for Lexington, sixth wettest all time for Louisville. Kind
That's
of
amazing.
interesting considering how dry the month was apart from Helene. So no, yeah, that goes back to averaging 1 point some odd inches through the 22nd, and then boom, here comes all the rainfall. So that is wild. So anybody else? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody taking some time out of their Thursday and joining us. Be sure to tune in next month for the webinar on November 7th. We'll see y'all then.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you,
Thank
Matt.
you.